This episode was recorded on June 16th, 2026. Welcome to Muckrakers, where we dig through the latest happenings around so-called AI. In each episode, we will highlight recent events, contextualize the most important ones, and try to separate muck from meaning. As always, I am your host, Jacob Hames, and joining me is my co-host, Igor Kravchuk.
Thanks, Jacob. This week we're talking about what the fuck is going on.
Yeah. So,
It's been a busy month or weeks. I'm not sure when we did the last episode.
Not just because it's busy for us in our personal lives, but then also in the AI space. Lots has been going on, so we'll just sort of, I guess, process that ourselves, and we'll get some coverage done. I've definitely got some things I want to discuss about, specifically Anthropic, Fable, Mythos, etc. But then there are other things as well. So
I think the biggest right now ongoing is Anthropic released the first Mythos class model to great fanfare, and we will have stuff to say about that. And then they immediately unreleased it because somebody in the government got scared and told them this is now weapons export or some similar classification, and now only truly US citizen or green card holders are allowed to interact with the model. So that is one big thing. Concurrently to that, the other big story is SpaceX IPO, and now SpaceX is buying Cursor because they had one AI company with lots of funding. Now they have another AI company. Surely this time they can make it work.
Mm-hmm.
I think this ties into overall the financing story and what is the state of the AI bubble basically, because also Anthropic and OpenAI OpenAI is cool, let's not mix this up, have confidentially filed for IPOs as well, with OpenAI basically coming out of it, and I think Anthropic so far hasn't confirmed, but the rumors are cooking. So people are getting ready to cash out, and there's lots of movement connected to that. The Pope is now also talking about AI and has opinions, which is fun. And Chris Olah is now a co-author with the Pope, so I think that's a bragging rights. What else happened?
I think that's it in terms of the things that I was thinking to cover. Let me double check.
I had one more thing written down. It's Chinese models are starting to also do closed versions because they're starting to be competitive with some of the closed models, really on par. And I guess they also need to start making money and locking people in. And what that means for the overall open weights and AI sovereignty situation. Because it also connects to the Fable and Mythos thing, because Anthropic basically got caught, or people realized that Anthropic silently nerfs use cases they think people shouldn't be doing. So they have officially stated now that there's filters that will make Fable, while it was out, dumber at machine learning research, which got some people mad. And then for this, some people looked into Chinese models, but it was also closing up, so there's discourse to be had on that as well.
I guess the other thing is the episode that will have recently come out of anti-AI safety, where I actually talked with someone who worked on gradient routing. I think I sent you some of those ideas, and that is relevant here because essentially what that research was, and it was done in collaboration with some researchers at Anthropic, enables capabilities restrictions at scale. So even more explicitly doing what you just mentioned there, of limiting people's I guess the capabilities that are given to the public, basically.
And maybe minor, just also interesting news of the law is moving on this stuff. In Germany, a court held Google liable for the AI slop that it shows in the search summaries because it was like making shit up, and then somebody sued, and then like the court said, Google, this is you saying something, so yeah, you did this, and you can't say whoopsie AI, which should make everyone in this industry sweat.
Yeah, it should.
This is only in Germany, so like it doesn't really matter. Might be contested, but I think it's also like worth just like throwing into the interesting things. But let's start talking about Fable first, maybe because that's like a good centerpiece.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was released. Well, Mythos slash Fable was released. So, like, Mythos became available to certain people, I think. I don't, or maybe it was just already available to those people. But then Fable was more generally available. If I believe, and I could be wrong here, but I believe you provided, like, the way that companies were able to use it was they had to be okay with uh, monitoring of their data, um, which had previously not been the case. And so, and technically, they don't. At least what was stated is that the data isn't kept for over 30 days or something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they just do like classification on it, but still, it requires you to turn off the no data retention for your entire workspace, I believe, not just for Fable conversations. Um, and also, is super token hungry, um, etc. So people can use that. We got what, like 3 days, 2 days of that being out, and they're making all these press releases and that sort of thing. And then, from my understanding, and what we know in the media right now, is presumably there was some high up C suite guy for Amazon who was consulted by someone in the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, I think, or something like that. And he was like, no, like our researchers did a jailbreak on Fable, and now it's like, doing things that it shouldn't be, basically. And then the US government was like, can't do that. And they used specifically like munitions and export controls restraints, which, like, whether or not that really should work is an open question. Um, it's arguable that it could work, but it definitely isn't purpose made for this specific use case. And so there, it's just like a very sort of patchwork kind of approach to doing this sort of regulation. And that's its own rabbit hole. Um, in addition to that, the U.S. government story differs from the one that I had just given about the Amazon C-suite guy. They say that actually there was someone in Anthropic who told Dario, like, no, I don't think this is safe. You need to remove it. Um, and Dario said no. And then that researcher, high up person at Anthropic, told the U.S. government. That does seem to be only the U.S. government story. Like, everyone else seems to be on the same page as the other public reporting. So, you know, um, grain of salt with that one. But the
Are you saying you
idea,
don't trust the U.S. government, Jacob?
I'm an American, so of course not. It's in my blood. I don't like
When has
mistrust.
this administration ever lied?
Mistrust of the government is a national right. Um, so yes, I do not trust the government. The other things that are interesting here. So right now I'm just sort of like giving the the primer for anyone who hasn't really dug into this story yet. But anyways, it wasn't that they said you can't have it publicly available. It wasn't that the government said you can't have this publicly available. It was that they said no foreign nationals are allowed to use this model. So going along the lines of like this is a national security concern. Even employees of Anthropic who are not U.S. citizens or it, it, you said green card earlier. I didn't know about that carve out. I thought it was just U.S. citizens, but
It's something I read. So like it's very restricted.
but like even if they're in the U.S., they may not be allowed to have access. And in practice, what that meant was that Anthropic said, okay, well, we can't actually vet vet the people who are using our systems robustly, and so we are just going to remove complete access to all of these models um, in order to comply. That is then I think, at least I find somewhat hilariously, that they really have played up this um oh poor us um story. Like on the user interface there is a um Claude Fable 5 is currently unavailable like banner on all chats, and it's like I literally wasn't using that before. I don't give a shit. But it's there. For a while I couldn't remove it. I think I can now at least close it once it's popped up. But the sort of like playing up of this scenario I think is definitely there. Um, Also relevant is that the jailbreak that was suggested sounds like it was actually not a jailbreak at all. So essentially, this C-suite level person either intentionally.
Actually, let me interject there. Like I
Okay,
might let you finish, but
you think it is a legitimate jailbreak?
like let's keep honest. Like what from what I've read was basically that like the jailbreak is being portrayed like by one security company's CEO. I think I said like, like the register. I think was like the uh, fix this is a prompt basically.
Yeah.
Um, and it was Katie Masuris, founder and CEO of Looter Security, um, wrote like a blog post where she went into details. And it's basically like point at a thing that you might have a security exploit, say, please fix the security exploit, like make this safe, and then like write tests to ensure that you really fixed it. And then you can, like extract out of the tests the exploit. Because it will write the exploit in the tests to make sure it's not there anymore.
Right.
And the thing is that like this is a jailbreak in the sense that like you can get it to do stuff that it should have guardrails against from Entropic's perspective. And like they kept drumming it up as like a cybersecurity ultra model that it was supposed to have these guardrails to make it not do that. So in that sense, I think it is a jailbreak. But the interesting thing is that it is also an impossible to fix jailbreak
Yeah.
if if you want it to be useful for anything.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I was trying to get at. I don't know if they're saying that this is a tool that should be used for defense, which is the narrative that's being pushed, then it has to be able to do that, right? Like there isn't a way around that. If it's supposed to be able to be used for defense, there is an inherent offense defense sort of trade off in situations like this, and you can't say it like, oh, well, we can have only defensive knowledge, and you can't draw any offensive knowledge from that defensive knowledge. That's not how it works.
Yeah, so like this is like a thing that if you work in security is a constant problem that people don't get. That like hacking just means like understand the system and make it do what you want. You can like hack together a solution, and they think kind of there's like hacking tools and there's good tools. And the thing is that like a defense tool, like what it allows you to like check for vulnerabilities, is exactly the same tool that you will run to check like deployed systems for vulnerabilities. Like they're exactly the same tool, and you can't really like fix this on the tool level. And it's a constant problem that people try to ban. In Germany, there's a so-called like hacker paragraph on the books that basically makes standard penetration testing software illegal to own. So if you're a German cybersecurity company, basically, you're constantly at risk of being put to jail with a like accusation of like you want to hack everyone with these illegal tools, which like not only for Americans, like freedom of speech people, is a bit of insanity. And the EU is also kind of like following this. And the guardrails on Mythos in this regard are like more of the same, basically. And when this discourse is now interesting, because I think we should also like, and I'll let you talk after this one, we should be clear. I personally don't think this is about the claimed facts at hand. Like, I think this is about Anthropic said no to Trump even a little bit, and there's now like leverage to make him scream like days or weeks before they have their IPO. Like somebody on Hacker News said like the total addressable market just got cut from billions of people to like a few million people in the US who can afford a clone, and that's like a massive problem if you're trying to IPO to raise more funding.
I mean, only if you only care about Fable. Like they still have all their other models which aren't being regulated, and
for now.
Okay, yeah, sure, but I think if they were going to be even right now, the grounds that are being used is essentially, I think at least the only way it makes any amount of sense is that the U.S. government is saying, well, Fable 5 it is better than everything else, right? It allows for something that is better than everything else at doing this task, and that differential is what we are preventing. Now, there are also arguments that that isn't true, that there are a number of other tools, models out there that can also find these same CVEs, vulnerabilities within the codes. But at least I think it's kind of funny, honestly, because Anthropic shit the bed themselves. Now they get to lie in it. Like, they pushed this narrative of our model is the strongest. Our model has unprecedented claims of being able to detect vulnerabilities. And they really went hard with that marketing push. And they've essentially allowed themselves to be subject to this critique. If they hadn't done that so aggressively, I don't think there would really be grounds for this at all, like even remotely. Whereas, given the circumstance, I don't think it's. If you take a naive person's view of the tech and take everything said at face value, then actually the U.S. government's approach like isn't the craziest.
It is actually exactly what Dario was advocating for before, where he said like the government needs to have like wide sweeping ability to like ban frontier models like that aren't like as well verified as theirs is kind of the way he went, and this was like memed to hell. You know, like the wait, not like that. Um, so like I
Yeah.
get what basically like you are indulging in a bit like of like the Schadenfreude, because like maybe also like so people who aren't constant listeners is like there's a thing called critty hype that like Jacob is a like Zen master and he walks the middle path and he's like neither a hater nor a booster. He's like perfectly like not enlightened centrist but like the good version of that. Whereas I am a dirty hater, right? People like me would claim that like since the beginning the whole AI safety shtick has been basically a way to distract from like the actual issue with like tech lets us do stuff, and we should ask who has control over that tech and what do we do to like make sure like the power overall gets distributed.
Which I do agree
So
with, just to be clear.
and distracts us into like here's this tech problem and it's just a completely new thing. We can't actually control this and the system is so powerful. And I think I call it tech obfuscation at like in some episodes. So like there's this thing, and now there's a bit of glee in seeing that backfire. I get that basically that like they've given the tools to an I would say possibly oppressive government to
I
do
mean, I
bad
would say
things to them.
oppressive.
Switzerland doesn't have the free speech of the US.
Sure.
Um,
But I do think that there is a bit of like you reap what you sow. I don't know. That's yeah, it's true that if you actually interrogate the claims here and compare to other frontier models and um, take the time to understand what's happening, the sweeping regulation isn't necessarily valid. However, one could also argue, and I think it would be a fair argument as well, that it isn't necessarily sweeping regulation. It is just Fable 5 right now, and it is just for people who are not US citizens, which has been sort of also the national security angle that's been pushed is that, we don't want to be giving these powerful technologies to our enemies. And the US government has sort of just embraced that framing here. And it isn't necessary that Fable 5 was removed, like complete access to Fable 5 was removed for everyone. What was necessary was that it was removed for people who were not US citizens or some other clarifiers as well. And it is Anthropic that can't meet that requirement. So in effect, they have to close it down. But like, I'm not super sympathetic for, oh, we didn't realize we actually had to be able to control the technology, be able to control it, access, and like in order to deploy it. I don't know. It just is not something that I'm like, yeah, any of the sort of arguments or defenses there, I don't find particularly compelling because of how the discourse, not just from Anthropic, but like in the space, has progressed.
yep. I mean, like, I still think it's very important to like not get sucked into this idea of kind of like, oh, there's like merit to like the face value storyline being told. Like I know you did it kind of like as a naive exercise, kind of like if we take them at face value, but I think it's important to like the actual reason why this happened is because like the government wanted to punish them for like
Yeah, yeah,
dissenting, and they had a cover story, and Anthropic handed them this cover story
yeah.
because, and we talked about this in one of our episodes, but like they might actually believe in the cover story, but the main thing the cover story allows them to do is to like justify doing sketchy stuff while calling themselves like good, and also calling for like regulation and preparing the place for like regulatory capture that doesn't affect them, but it will make it harder for people to compete. Like no matter what their intentions are, that is like the outcome of what they're doing and how they're doing it. But yeah,
Yeah.
after that, like I agree with you. Like it is like a nice exercise to see the inconsistency, the hypocrisy, like in the sense, like you know, like you advocate for A, but then you can't live up to those standards, and then like you say when somebody calls you on it, like that is unfair.
Yeah.
It
I
will be
guess
interesting.
that's what the hypocrisy is the thing that I'm pointing out, and the thing that I'm trying to be like, the fact that there is so much. I agree with you that the actual argument is not valid, and the actual reasons, the actual motivations for why this has happened, are not represented in that argument. Uh, but like, if you're going to use an argument like that, then at least be ready for it when it's weaponized against you.
And maybe let's slightly move on from this, like a little bit, and like we do like a small detour.
Okay.
Um,
To what?
which like the IPO situation, I think, is
Sure.
interesting here, where if we step back a bit and we don't focus on an individual IPO, we're entering in the finding out era, I would say. Jacob's people have a wonderful saying, and I'm talking about the bald eagle people here right now.
You mean fuck around, find out?
Exactly,
Okay.
like there has been lots of like fucking around with wild claims and speculation and hype story, and the use of this critty hype, where I'm never sure if I ever closed the attention of like criticizing and drumming up fear of this is so dangerous as a way to sell the thing, has been like a modus operandi of all of those companies. But now we're entering the find out story, where like if you make people either like very scared, or you create like the surface justification of this is very dangerous as a way of selling your model, when it can actually be used against you as well, is like one thing. And the, moving on to this, like the fact that now SpaceX is going public, and they
Has gone.
has gone public, and they had a nice IPO pop, and so far the Musk effect is still holding strong. But to do that, they also did a bunch of like genius level financial engineering, which is
What exactly are you referring to there?
so for people who don't know, IPOs, initial public offering, is where investors get to cash out. And so they're always
And
engineered.
also part of that, like the how in how they cash out, is it is opened up to public, like you don't need to have these special what are the
Qualified
require
investor
yeah,
like
you don't need to be a
qualification.
qualified investor um in order to invest in it anymore. Now you just need to be a person. Um, and so you can then invest in it, and the normal people investing in it is what then increases the stock price, um, because now there are more people who are investing in it.
Well, like that's the asterisk. Like what actually the main thing is that, like, it is public, so everyone can give money. Before, the main concern is more like deal flow, who gets cut into the deal.
Sure.
I mean, like the qualified investor is another thing. But then
I'm trying
you're
to
bringing
abstract it a little bit.
but the main thing is you bring actual cash, right? And that's the thing that the company needs. Or originally, it was to actually raise cash to pay for things, because the share price doesn't matter if you can't sell it. Like it only is worth something if you can actually trade it, and
Uh-huh.
that's the point of an IPO. But the old investors always want to get, like actual, like, their return. So it's always engineered that, like, in the beginning you price it like slightly below demand, as in like there's a market clearing price and you go like slightly below because you want it to rise, so more people kind of like FOMO in because they see it rise, and also so the people who want to sell, they can sell without dipping the price because that looks bad. And so IPOs always, unless they're really fucked up, rise for a few days to a few weeks, and then at some point there will be like the quarterly earnings reports and like the normal market price finding mechanism kicks in. So it's a common thing to kind of like juice the books a bit before an IPO. And what SpaceX did, amongst other things, was they did a big deal with Anthropic, basically like where Anthropic committed to pay, I think it's like 1 billion, 2 billion, like billions of dollars per month. I think it might be
I don't
month.
know. I don't know
So,
the financial deals, but I
on
know they're renting GPUs because Grok doesn't have any demand because it's shit. And so which XAI is now part of, and Grok, which is the model it creates, is now part of SpaceX for some fucking reason. So by doing that and then making a deal with Anthropic, and Anthropic saying, yeah, we'll use your data centers, whatever. With apparently, from what I understand, a very bad deal on the SpaceX side. Like Anthropic has a, I believe, just like a can walk 90 days clause in there, so they can just say, yeah, we actually don't like this. We're gonna leave, and there are no downsides for them doing that.
which
Um,
importantly was announced separately from the big headline. Like the big headline was like, we have a deal, 1.25 billion per month, and like up until May 29. Like gonna make so much money now. Like this is a big win for SpaceX. Also, Anthropic has a walk away clause. They can cancel this before at any point with 90 days warning. That was like the pacing. This is like the type of like IPO engineering that you do. Google did a similar deal with him afterwards, and the important thing to know there is Google has invested into SpaceX. They own like 5%. And like after like I read an us that like if they actually like have the effect that this guy estimated, by committing to paying them a certain, I think hundreds of, like tens of billion, like certain amount, we can link it in the show notes. They will have like made money on that spend because that share in SpaceX it would be worth more than the money that they spend.
yeah,
So that's why I call it like genius financial engineering.
sure.
Um,
And there are other aspects as well, like somehow they've pumped the valuation to what, like 108 or something billion, um, and that's just insane because the only part of the companies or of SpaceX that has legitimate profits, which are also
it's
reducing.
2.1 trillion.
Sorry, 2.1 trillion. Jesus Christ. The only, sorry, the Pope's in the room now. I have to be nicer there. But the idea is, if you have a valuation that high, then first of all, it's insane. The other part that's like, I guess, is meaningfully intelligent if you are in the interest of maintaining and entrenching your own power, is that because of how they've designed this, Elon Musk maintains, like will forever in perpetuity maintain at least complete majority of SpaceX. Um, and so there is effectively no way for anyone else to ever come close to that with SpaceX. And there are other limitations that prevent normal investors or coalitions of investors from doing this as well. So I believe it's something like you need to have 3% or more stock in the company in order to be able to like have a certain type of I guess like request justification or like oppose a given decision. So like
Shareholder
Google,
rights is like the
yeah.
super thing. Yep.
So all of this effectively like consolidates power into Elon Musk, and also makes a ton of money, and does so when, oh right, the only part of the company that is actually making money is Starlink, where everything else is sort of a dumpster fire, um, and it just doesn't make sense. I don't know. It doesn't
Well,
make sense to me.
it like so to you like the story is of course like they're gonna go to Mars, they're gonna go to the moon. This is the new frontier, and like the reason why I said this is like the finding out areas. Like I think we did the bubble episode, and I think I explained this thing of kind of like bubbles being kind of like they can survive as long as they don't hit like an event that where the belief in the bubble takes too much of a hit. If not, then like very brief summary, also for people who didn't hear it. If you look at any bubble, which like not as an insult, but kind of like just from a mechanical purpose, if you ask yourself what makes a bubble, it usually like we call that stuff where like we don't understand why it's worth so much, but it seems to keep growing in value, and people keep to want more of it, and that's kind of this loop, like the self-fulfilling loop that makes the price go higher. That can go on for as long as people kind of like in their head implicitly do this expected value calculation of like, I can sell this at a higher price if I buy in now. And sure, there's this much risk. Let's say there's like only 5% chance that this actually pans out. But there's a 90% chance that the price will rise high enough that I can just cash out. And then if that 90% times the price that people estimate will hit, plus the 5% times the actual payoff, if that adds up to like what they feel comfortable, kind of like what they want, then it's kind of rational for somebody to invest into a bubble. But if that belief, like that's like plausibility of the price continuing to rise ever goes down, then people just look at the kind of much lower chance of like the bubbly thing, like the original like value excuse. In the case of Bitcoin, it's this idea of like alternative money system, which isn't worth like what it is worth right now, but the story of it keeps it going. In the case of AI, right now it's always about like eventually this will be AGI and the whole economy will run off this, and we get a big cut of it. That's the two things that both need to happen. So it can't be that like AI becomes like Postgres or other open source database, just like a tool in a tool belt of techies, and it's just a new way of building stuff, but there's no monopoly on it. It needs to be like there's a monopoly, everything will run on it, and that is what justifies the valuations. And for SpaceX, it's like there will be a new frontier. We will be the only people who have Mars. So the only way for you to get a cut of Mars is to invest right now. That's what justifies the price. And because of that, would be my take, they're doing this financial engineering. Also because of that is why just today Musk exercised the 60 billion option he had to buy Cursor, because it keeps the story going. And as long as the story keeps going,
Well, also because Grok needed like anything that would mean that people actually use it, and they didn't have anything, so they needed a band-aid patch for that one.
And they want to maybe use the talent that Cursor has because they're making their own models as well. Like there's actual reasons to do that. Yep. But it is always kind of like you need to survive and keep the story going. That's the main thing that feeds into this. And I started this segment with like we're entering the finding out pages, and you're like, there is a quarterly earnings report coming. And also like we will now see like how all of these like things play out. Because this segues a bit also into like Anthropic again, but with both OpenAI and Anthropic having filed as well, they need to do the same dance. But now there is one reference class where we see a AI company, XAI, even though, you know, like if you're in the industry, you know what the laugh is. And we can see the economics of those data centers. They can see the depreciation rate. They can see how that actually looks like. And that's gonna make it harder to keep the story going, despite the fact that both OpenAI and Anthropic are now trying to like say, coding boring. We still do it, but look at this. We're doing biology now and chemistry, and we're also doing like Goldman Sachs thing. And they are announcing left and right kind of like whole squads of people that help you integrate the AI into your workflows. Like OpenAI has like an implementation company that they did as a joint venture. Anthropic just announced the Anthropic Core, which sounds super dystopian. It's basically like missionaries that get embedded in nonprofits, and then they help them like
Jesus.
embed Claude, and Anthropic pays these people, but critically through a employer of record. So these people will never be formally employed by Anthropic. It's always like some kind of like middleman employer.
Why? Why is that?
Well, the middleman employer like is probably because like they will not vet these people precisely, and there might be like claims of like, you know,
Oh,
hey,
yeah, yeah.
this kid that was selected as a Anthropic fellow or Anthropic Core fellow hooked up a workflow that was supposed to automate our small non-person, but it has leaked all of our PII data now, and they want to hold like somebody liable. And if it was like Anthropic's employee, could be a thing, but now it's going to be this intermediary non-profit. But
Right.
like,
Yeah, that makes sense.
if you actually believed in AGI and like the original story, you wouldn't do this because it's kind of a distraction, and you wouldn't need this because it would actually generalize. And what we're seeing is they're spending lots of manpower, hiring lots of people to like go into individual domains, kind of like try to find like the good workflows and automate them with their technology, which is valuable and it can still have a big impact, but it's very much not the original story.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I've said, I think before on the podcast, it is a return to expert systems, and it is a return to expert systems with an improvement. Having a natural language interface for an expert system is a legitimate boon. It is not useless. It is a valuable contribution, but we are still back in that expert system territory.
And also, like if you want to be very nitpicky, because like I know there's a nerd here. It's not just an expert system. Yeah, you can also call it like a prior fitted network, and there's like some embedded statistical knowledge in there, and there's also
Yeah,
some
yeah,
like
but like the in practice, it's the same as how expert systems were being implemented back when they were hot.
and also how like ML systems were being implemented back in way what and when data science was a thing. Yeah, like you have like a new technology, you have like a horde of consultants that makes you your custom bespoke version of that. It is not plug and play. It is not the agent like self figuring it out. But important thing is that like they're doing it now in bio and in chemistry and in other fields where there's like big money, where like sifting through large amounts of data with some domain knowledge and like handholding it a bit can yield, you know, like a new drug with like billions of dollars. So they're preparing the story for like how profitable this can be. And importantly, it's a thing that they haven't saturated yet. Coding is saturated. Like it's good, it's useful, and like I never thought it would be this good 2 or 3 years ago. Like I think we did an episode of me kind of like shifting my thing because like I ate shit there basically. I was wrong in like how far how fast it would get there basically. I think I thought it would plateau earlier. But if you use this system as well, it's not self like it's not standalone. Like you can't take hands off. Like there's still a lot of work, and it still can't do abstraction, and it is not getting better. Like it makes the same mistakes. There's very little improvement on that front. And if you try to have it right, documentation, same thing. It's just not there. And we're fixing this with the skills on a case by case basis, but it's not the same as what is sold basically. And yeah, I think that is just worth tracking because like they will really try to keep the story going for the bubble reason. They need to keep it going until they went public and it's like kind of cashed out. So there will be more of this type of entry. And even after being public, a lot of like, you know, power and money still rides on it not crashing, and also like more and more like risk being concentrated. Important thing is that some index funds including the ones that some American pension funds use to track their investments, have been lobbied partially to loosen their rules to fast track SpaceX into these funds and to make it not liable,
No,
eligible.
so what exactly has happened there is essentially like the idea is, at least as far as I understand it, again, I'm not like a financial person, but I've looked at a couple articles. So this is my understanding. Typically, if you do an IPO, you then have to wait, I don't know, 6 months or something at least, until your um, stock price levels out. Like Igor said earlier, there is people understand that there is that initial sort of like increase, and then it levels out. And maybe it goes down a little bit, maybe it goes down a lot, but it will eventually sort of get to the correct place, and then at least in terms of how the market sees it, and then once it reaches that, that is the point at which you can then say, okay, well, I'd like to be included in the Nasdaq, or the other finance terms. Imagine that I know them. So if that is the case, then when it is added, because of the I forget exactly what they're called, but the portfolios that you can buy into, just like the S&P 500, and then it sort of takes segments of each of the things that are listed there, because SpaceX has been allowed to fast track to inclusion on these lists faster than the typical turnaround is, which allows for it to sort of settle. What is likely to happen is that the index funds, that's what they're called, will auto buy these SpaceX shares because that's how they're set up. And then people who don't necessarily know that they are buying into SpaceX are buying into SpaceX, and they are part of the group that is artificially inflating the price of the stock immediately after it is IPO'd. So that hasn't happened yet. It has IPO'd, but it has not been listed on the index funds as far as I am aware. But it will be listed much sooner than it otherwise would.
In
And
some of them, not
yeah,
in
not
all of
all of
them.
them. But because of that, people who are not, paying attention to this, or not watching their stocks, and have index funds, which at this point is actually a quite significant amount of people, because it represents a reasonable, at least it has historically represented a reasonable investment to make. But now that may not be the case, because by doing so, you are essentially absorbing some of the costs from SpaceX's IPO.
But it also needs to be said, it might still be a good investment. And there's also an argument to be made, like the whole indexing philosophy is to not try to predict the future. And like this one, I genuinely don't know. Because,
Yeah.
like, if you were trying to short Tesla and you avoided buying Tesla because you thought it would crash, like, you lost a lot of money over the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Like, so, like, it's generally hard, but it is part of the financial engineering here of like how to get capital flowing into this company and into these other companies. And I think it's just worth that people track this. It's also worth saying that like if you follow the SP 500 or the FTSE World Stock Index, stuff like this, like your risk is limited. Like I think on some of them, basically like 1.5% of like your investment would be allocated towards SpaceX, even if they go to like trillions, like 5 trillion or something like that. So like it's still okay. It's just a quite big chunk, because normally individual companies would be like 0.1%, 0.2%. So yeah, I think that's the other thing worth talking about. This, when we find out in the like finding out phase, it will now really affect a lot of people via their 401ks, via their pension funds, like via lots of different systems.
I think
I
that takes
think,
us through the IPOs and the Anthropic and stuff. So the only one that's sort of left is the Pope. Is that correct?
and the Chinese models, which
Oh yeah.
like because of also Fable had guardrails because it was so dangerous, and we needed to like be saved from it. Those guardrails were, like state of the art. So like, I work in a biotech company. If you so much as say DNA or protein in a Fable prompt, it will bump you into Opus.
Well, the only thing that I would caveat there is like, is that is that robust 100% of the time with memory, or is that only like, are you doing zero shot? Because typically,
Jacob, do you
what?
think I have memory turned on?
No, of course not, which is why I'm saying this. Memory does make it easier to do that kind of thing. Um, I know people who are like, yeah, when I'm using my system, I can ask all these questions about, biology and stuff like that, and then I try the exact same thing on, not my account basically, and it prevents me from doing it, right? And so that is another thing to consider there. There are ways around it basically.
Which actually is like not good for Entropic. Like if this is actually like a thing of like, if a memory just makes it seem like it's okay, then it will just give you access. But I wasn't the only one who found the tightness of it ridiculous. Like I didn't care.
Okay.
Like I didn't notice a big difference with Fable as well. But there was like discourse on the internet, and then people read like the disclosure, and they also said, "Ah, yeah, we also silently degrade people who want to like build pre-training harnesses for LLMs, who want to do like competing foundation model services, who optimize kernels with it." And it is already against the Anthropic terms of services to use their research product for this, because safety. But now they're kind of like silently degrading it, and the internet flipped their shit, or like the coding, like the LLM using coding internet flipped their shit. And Anthropic apologized and now makes this as visible as the other guardrails. But it also like sparked discourse about, like, oh, just use the Chinese models, like just mass migrate to the Chinese models. They're cheaper and as good. And I think an interesting thing there is basically to know that one, it doesn't save you. Like, try asking the hosted, like, bleeding edge Quen or GLM or Kimi about Tiananmen, and see how they affect things. And there's nothing that guarantees you that like they don't also sabotage their competitors. So there's a whole discourse around the sovereignty of coding tools if we all use those at some point, on top of externalities. And the other interesting aspect is something that like Jacob has done research on, is like how much can we trust the benchmarks? Because on the benchmarks, the Chinese models are very close to Claude and Co. In lived experience, it varies wildly. And I think as we enter this like finding out phase after on many fronts, we will also maybe see like more principled evaluations of this via like a strategic data sovereignty angle.
What do you
Where
mean?
while Jacob is a red-blooded patriotic American, I am a red-blooded patriotic European. Now I don't
That
have
doesn't exist.
a United States of Europe, but it should exist. And I live in the country that is the most anti that happening, which is a bit ironic. But I think it is important that Europe has like their own data stack and like data sovereignty, because Trump already banned like
Yeah, I do too.
commissioners that were finding people. Yeah, and Mistral ain't it right now. And I would really
No.
like Mistral to be better. Um, and in the absence of Mistral, the best we can kind of do is to host Chinese models, but that's also not going to last. But I would fully expect, and like if anybody is listening to this who has leeway with European politicians, like please, like let me talk with them and let me convince them that they need to put like money into like bootstrapping like a whole effort to make that happen. Like, and starting with like very principled evals that actually cover the use cases that we need, so we can like see which of the open models or like the candidate models are actually fit for purpose,
I
because that
mean,
is missing right now.
the EU is actually funding evals more than most other
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, most other municipalities, I guess. Um, I'm not saying it's great, but yeah, I do think that they're not fully asleep in that regard. Um, the one thing that I do always like to bring up when we talk about eval validity is, I alluded to it earlier, the idea that we aren't actually doing evaluations of the things that we care about. We're evaluating things in uh, predefined settings, and then maybe we're updating those every once in a while, and we're running it on base models. Sometimes those aren't even the models that are being provided to users on the interface websites, let alone whatever else has been added to their context. When we have a system that has absorbed the memory and has persistent sort of knowledge of something, it is necessarily going to behave differently than the baseline. And there there is no public monitoring of this. Theoretically, OpenAI, Anthropic, the closed APIs could do this monitoring, but how would you actually operationalize that at scale when everyone's asking different questions? And how would you convey it, right? And that's like in the best case. That's if they're actually trying, which I think we all know my stance on whether or not that's the case.
I think it would be interesting if you can link some of the specific like grant vehicles or like things where you've seen the EU fund this stuff, because like I know there's like generic funding pots, but like I don't know these kind of like, so like there's like the NLNet that I do know, that is basically like something like this for internet and overall digital technology like sovereignty, and they fund stuff like Tala. They have like Restack, which is like an overall like internet set, and they have like a bunch of good stuff that helps a decentralized internet function. And because the EU is more decentralized than the US, that's in the interest basically.
So the what I'm referring to is the EU AI office like tenders for, at least that's the one that I know off the top of my head. Um, there were four, or I guess the call is divided into six lots: CBR and risks, cyber offense risks, loss of control risks, harmful manipulation risks, socio-technical risks, and cross-cutting support for conducting agentic evaluations. Um, and those efforts are active. So there's at least that. That was a total of 9 million euros for those things. Now, that isn't a lot when you look at, how much things cost at large scales, but that is something. And I don't think that's being done by the US, for example. Um,
I'm sure somebody will send us, oh, there's this grant, but like, please do send it. I'm interested. So like, yeah,
yeah, there probably is.
yeah. But yeah, that was just something I found of note, and that like I think would become more relevant because like with the current shenanigans, like one thing the Fable thing also does is like you know all those European companies that are rushing to integrate Claude into their system, like if you have any risk management officers or like IT, like chief information technology people that are like worth thinking. Like they should be sweating and they should be thinking about like what to actually do and how to kind of like de-risk this. Because for now we still have Opus, but like wait until they learn that Opus can also do the thing that Fable does, just slower. Like,
Yeah.
but I think that's all we have. Unless you want to talk about the Pope.
No, I don't feel like I know enough about the Pope situation. Um,
So we might do a special issue on the Pope's opinions on AI safety, if we feel like it. But like, I think that is maybe worth bringing in as just like the general vibe was, hey, companies,
General
you
vibe.
should share. The overall vibe was, hey, companies, you should share the wealth, you should pay for the externalities, you should like make sure this serves humanity. And Chris Ola had like opinions on it, and I think it is part of the critty hype, like, and safety washing propaganda technique from Anthropic side.
I maybe we should do a little dig into um, particularly public figures who have decided to make statements about AI recently. So the two that I think of immediately are the Pope and Bernie Sanders. Um, I think that there are probably a couple others as well who we could bring in there and just sort of see what the public what they're saying to the public, how they came to those conclusions, um, and how people seem to be receiving it. I think is interesting.
Yeah. Where like, I don't say like both of them say stuff that I at least agree with. It is just that like at this point, at least the Pope is like more weaponized as part of the propaganda cycle rather than actually like being helpful. I believe because like we all know the problems that they're pointing at, but
I think that underestimates how influential someone like that could be with certain demographics who are more um, who are less likely to trust the establishment in general.
but the thing is, it's still misguided. I think Bernie might even have pointed at the companies, but like in this like Magnifica Humanitas, this like document by the Pope, I don't think he specifically calls out like the power dynamics and shames the companies as like being full of shit, but he can like in general calls for the AI to be disarmed from the logics of domination, exploitation, and war, and wants technological progress generally be placed in the service of human dignity, solidarity, and the common good, which is like, Anthropic does that in their own assessment. They were part of it. That's what we're doing. See, Pope says it. And I think that is a thing that either deserves like you should like we should maybe look at it and give it a close read, but it should be like on a quick summary, like the takeaway of people that like it is very well meaning and we're not against it, but there's like a second order effect of it being co-opted as part of this like propaganda machine that is also feeding the soon to be IPO. Like the technology is so dangerous that the Pope says it must be stopped.
Yeah. And then I also think there is an aspect of like political maneuvering there, regardless of how much we believe that there should be a meaningful separation between what a religious leader says and how people interpret it. I think that you know as it has been demonstrated, Trump will be outspoken against the Pope. So I think there's also a strategic angle there that has to be played. You don't want to overstep and get more flack than is necessary. But yeah, I guess that.
Basically, what
Sorry,
we're
did you?
saying is like we hope that he doesn't send JD Vance to the Vatican again in response to a document.
Well, then the Pope would die. JD Vance kills popes. That's how it works.
Jacob is saying that I just overall
Not
made a
directly,
gesture.
of course. He kills popes in the same way that smallpox from Spanish settlers killed the natives. You know, so it's not direct. I mean, actually, in that case, sometimes it was direct, but I mean like the initial phase where it wasn't consciously done. Anyways, that's all the muck that we have for this week. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it around with all those people that you think would also find value out of it.
And if you didn't enjoy it, then please leave a comment telling us exactly what you hated.
Sure, and I guess if you also or exactly what you loved, because big reviews, good reviews go a long way. I guess the last thing is just another side note is there is a new show on Kairos FM, which is a short run audio documentary about reclaiming UBI, and I think it's pretty cool. There's also an interview with its host on the Anti Safety podcast as well, both of which are pretty interesting. I think Joe Williams is the host. Joe did a really awesome job, and I'm excited for the next episode.
I think actually, because Jacob didn't do it, there's also a older episode that might be worth checking out in the context of Mythos. Is like building asymmetric defenses with sign up Marit. I apologize for the name mangling.
Majid.
So like that seems relevant. So check that out as well.
All right. We'll see you next time.